Today, we're venturing into, well, a really knotty global issue.
Hmm.
The allegations surrounding terrorist organizations, specifically those with alleged roots in Pakistan.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. We've got a range of sources here, and our mission really is to pull out the key insights, the core knowledge, to try and give you a clearer view of this very complex landscape.
It really is shaped by decades of geopolitics.
Hmm.
And I think to really get a handle on what's happening today, you have to look back.
Back at the history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pakistan's historical relationship with militant groups, it goes way back.
Okay, let's do that. Let's dig into those historical roots. The sources point strongly to the 1980s, right? The Soviet-Afghan War as being pretty pivotal.
Absolutely pivotal.
Yeah.
You had Pakistan, specifically through its intelligence agency, the ISI,
The Inter-Services Intelligence.
right, playing a huge role. They were essentially the channel,
For
for U.S. and Saudi money, weapons, resources,
Hmm.
all flowing to the Mujahideen fighting the Soviets.
And it's sort of wild how these massive global events, they spin off in directions no one predicts. Because it was right then, wasn't it, that some of these groups we're talking about actually started forming?
Precisely. Like Al-Qaeda.
Right.
Osama bin Laden founded it in Peshawar during that period. Now, initially, the goal was clear. Get the Soviets out of Afghanistan.
But once they left,
Well, the whole map kind of changed, didn't it? The focus shifted.
shifted where?
Yeah.
Our sources mention Kashmir, Afghanistan again.
Yeah. Those became the new focal points for some of these networks. And then you roll into the 1990s, and other players emerge, big ones.
Lashkar-Taiba.
That's the one. Leti pops up in the 90s. And there are these persistent allegations, strong suggestions of ISI backing,
With the aim being.
targeting India, specifically in Kashmir. That seems to be the primary focus mentioned.
And Letty wasn't actually formed in the 90s, but late 80s, just as the Soviet thing was winding down.
That's right, late 80s. So that post-Soviet environment,
Yeah.
you can see how it might have been fertile ground.
Okay. Then the 2000s arrive, and another name comes up constantly. Jaish-e-Mohammed. JEM.
Yes, founded around 2000, Masood Azhar. And the pattern looks similar, doesn't it?
Alleged ISI support. Focus in India and Kashmir.
That's what the sources suggest.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting the U.S. officially designated both Leti and JEM as terrorist organizations back in 2001.
So international recognition of their activities was pretty early in that decade.
Mm-hmm. But then, a bit later, 2007, you get a different kind of group forming. Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP.
And their agenda seems, well, fundamentally different from Letty or
They're
JEM.
totally different. The TTP's main enemy is the Pakistani state itself. They've claimed attacks inside Pakistan, lots of them, plus cross-border stuff into Afghanistan.
So they pose a direct internal threat to Pakistan, unlike the others primarily focus outwards.
Exactly. It's a really interesting divergence in their aims and targets.
Okay, that historical timeline is crucial, sets the stage. Now, how do these groups actually, operate, and what's been the impact? The sources talk about key routes.
Well, a huge factor is that border. Pakistan-Afghanistan is long, porous, especially in the tribal areas.
Rugged terrain.
Extremely rugged, mountainous, historically very hard for any central government to really control. And it's become this major hub, particularly for groups like the TTP and also Al-Qaeda's local affiliate,
Right.
AQIS. The geography itself is almost part of their defense.
But it's not just about physical territory anymore, is it? The digital space seems huge. Social media.
Oh, absolutely. The Pakistani government itself has apparently stated that something like 80%, a really high number of these organizations, use social media for recruitment.
80%. Wow.
Teach us how adaptable they are, using modern tech to, spread their message, find recruits. It's a whole other layer on top of the physical routes.
And when we talk about impact, the 2008 Mumbai attacks stand out as just devastating.
Horrifically so. Executed by Leti, with links to JEM suggested too, and the planning, crucially traced back to Pakistan.
166 people killed.
Yes. A brutal demonstration of capability and reach.
And the sources we looked at don't paint this as just rogue actors, do they? There is that confirmation about ISI involvement.
That's right. David Headley, who was deeply involved in the reconnaissance for the Mumbai attacks, his testimony directly implicated elements within the ISI in providing support and direction.
Which really underlines that whole issue of alleged state links. It's
Yeah.
incredibly contentious.
Deeply contentious.
Now, Pakistan has reacted, hasn't it? Undertaken big military operations against some of these groups.
Yes, definitely. Operations like Zarbi-Az, for instance.
Yeah.
That was mainly targeted at the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, in the tribal areas.
And the results.
Well, reports claimed thousands of militants were killed. So, significant impact in one sense. But
Yeah.
there are consequences.
Such as.
Some fighters apparently just moved across the border, fled into Afghanistan,
And then?
and then, according to some reports, started launching attacks back into Pakistan from Afghanistan. So it highlights how complex these military solutions are, the unintended knock-on effects.
It really does paint an incredibly complicated picture. Because you have these serious allegations, state links, devastating attacks. But then Pakistan itself pushes back hard.
Very hard. They consistently deny state sponsorship, and they strongly emphasize that they are a primary victim of terrorism.
And the numbers they cite are huge, aren't they?
Staggering. Some reports mentioned over 80,000 Pakistani lives lost to terrorism since 2000. They stress the sacrifices they've made fighting it.
So how do we reconcile these two narratives? Victim and allegedly sometimes an enabler, they seem completely contradictory.
That's the core tension, isn't it? And it's where things get murky. Critics and some analysts in our sources, they raise this argument about strategic interests. Meaning, perhaps, Pakistan takes very strong action against groups that directly threaten the Pakistani state, like the TTP, but maybe takes a different stance or is perceived to be less forceful towards groups whose focus is external, like those targeting India.
A selective approach driven by strategic goals.
That's the argument some observers make. It suggests a kind of complex balancing act, perhaps, or strategic calculation. It's debated, obviously.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we're left with this really multifaceted image, aren't we? Pakistan as, like you said, seemingly contradictory. Both a major victim suffering huge losses.
Undeniably.
And also facing these persistent, serious allegations of enabling or at least historically linking with certain groups.
Exactly. It's definitely not black and white. It's shades of gray. Now, there has been some acknowledgement of international concerns, some steps taken.
Like the FATF gray list.
Yes, being removed from the Financial Action Task Force gray list in 2022. That suggested Pakistan had made efforts, particularly around, tightening financial controls to curb terror funding.
So some progress noted internationally.
Some progress, yes. But you'd have to say the fundamental challenges, terrorism in that region, the instability, they are still very much present.
It seems clear they are. The history is deep, the border situation is complex, the geopolitics, it all feeds into it.
It does. Those historical ties, the fluid borders, the web of regional and international interests, it all contributes to a situation that remains, volatile.
And as you listen to all this, as you process it, it really makes you think about the long game, doesn't it? What are the long-term consequences of this history? How will these deep roots in this ongoing fight shape the future there? And, what mix of outside pressure and internal Pakistani choices will steer things from here?
Yeah. It's a situation with so many layers. Definitely demands ongoing attention, ongoing analysis.